لعلكم ترحمون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا يسخر قوم من قوم عسى أن يكونوا خيرا منهم ولا نساء من نساء عسى أن يكن خيرا منهن ولا تلمزوا أنفسكم ولا تنابزوا بالألقاب بئس اسم الفسوق بعد الإيمان ومن لم يتب فأولئك هم الظالمون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن إن بعض الظن إثم ولا تجسسوا ولا يغتب بعضكم بعضا أيحب أحدكم أن يأكل لحم أخيه ميتا فكرهتموه واتقوا الله إن الله تواب رحيم. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير.
Jazakumullah ta'ala asr al-jaza.
Translation of the verses that I have just recited. The verses that I have recited is from Surah Al-Hujurat, verse number 11 till 14. And the translation of these verses are as follows. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, ever merciful. Surely all believers are brothers, so make peace between brothers, and fear Allah, that mercy may be shown to you. O ye who believe, let not one people deride another people, who may be better than they, nor let women deride other women, who may be better than they. And defame not your own people, nor call one another by nicknames. Bad indeed is evil reputation after the profession of belief, and those who repent not are the wrongdoers. O ye who believe, avoid most of suspicions, for suspicion in some cases is a sin, and spy not, nor backbite one another. Would any of you like to eat the flesh of his brother who is dead? Certainly you would loathe it, and fear Allah. Surely Allah is oft returning with compassion and is merciful. O mankind, we have created you from a male and a female, and we have made you into tribes and sub-tribes, that you may recognize one another. Verily, the most honorable among you in the sight of Allah is he who is the most righteous among you. Surely Allah is all-knowing, all-aware. Jazakallah.
Jazakumullah ta'ala asr al-jaza.
Viewers, our special guest this evening, respected Dr. Sir Ifthkar Ahmad Ayaz Sahib, was awarded the KD, the Knight Commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire in 2015. He was the first British citizen to receive the knighthood. This was the second time he had been honoured by Her Majesty the Queen following his recognition with an OBE, Officer of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, in 1998. Last year, he was appointed ambassador to the Commonwealth and the UN Human Rights Council. He is now also on a board. He's also a board member of the UN International Atomic Energy Agency. Dr. Ayaz Sahib was born in 1934 and received his early education in Qadian, India. He moved to Tanzania at an early age, where he received his secondary education. He has a master's degree in applied linguistics and a PhD in human development. During his long career, Dr. Ayaz Sahib has worked with the Commonwealth and several United Nations organizations such as FAO, UNESCO, UNDP. He has been an honorary consul of Tuvalu in the UK since 1995. He's also served as the national president of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community UK from 1997 to 2001. He's currently serving as the chairman of the International Human Rights Committee and also a director and member of several other Ahmadiyya Jamaat organizations. He's also closely involved with the UN High Commission for Refugees for the welfare and well-being of Ahmadiyya asylum seekers and refugees. Respected Dr. Sir Ifthkar Ahmad Ayaz Sahib, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. A very warm welcome to you, and thank you for giving up your precious time and being with us today.
Jazakumullah.
Dr. Sahib,
Yes, sir.
Can we start? You are a very well-known personality in the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. Can we start by telling us a little bit about your family background, your childhood, your parents, and how Ahmadiyyat came into your family?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن يطع الله ورسوله ويخشى الله ويتم قلوبه فأولئك هم الفائزون. Respected, highly respected Regional Amir Saab, East London region, and all the presidents of the region and members of the Jamaats in the region, particularly the youngsters. I'm such a pleasure in having this opportunity of joining you today through this Zoom program.
Dr. Sahib, I think we've lost the sound. Unfortunately, I think Dr. Saab may have dropped out. I think we'll just wait for him to come back in.
I'm sorry we had gone off air for a little while, but
Yes.
can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear now. Yes.
Thank you,
Please
Jazakallah.
proceed.
Jazakallah. So what I was saying was that there is nothing very special about me or my family, but there was one thing, and that was that I have tried in my life to follow the enlightenment and direction given by Allah in the Holy Quran in this verse that I just recited. This is a verse from Surah An-Nur, um, and what it really means is, and whoso obeys Allah and His Messenger and fears Allah and takes Allah as a shield for protection, it is they who will be successful. So, primarily, it is our relationship and connection and our absolute faith in Allah that helps us to succeed in life. It is not so much the personal physical efforts that we make, it is much more the blessing that we derive by connecting ourselves faithfully and loyally to Allah and obeying Him in His commandments and other directives as He has given to us in the Holy Quran. So, as I have been asked about my family, my great grandparents, they came to the Punjab and settled around a place which is very close to Bhera, which was the residence, which was where our beloved first Khalifa was born and bred. And also, we had another companion of the promised Messiah who was brought up in that town, and he belonged to that town, Hazrat Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Saab. So, those very eminent spiritualists of God Almighty in this age, they were the residents of Bhera, and our place where my family settled was just about 10 kilometers from Bhera, and that was a salt market. There is a very prominent and very well-known salt market in Pakistan, which is known as Kiora, and that is on the banks of River Jhelum. So, and on the other side of the river, there was a salt market, and that is where my great grandfather had settled. They had come to that area during the time of Sher Shah Suri, who was one of the generals and rulers of the Mughal Empire. My grandfather, his name was Haji Jalaluddin. He was a caravan trader and a very well-known figure in his area, very prominent. He was the president of the local council and well-known in the society. And he used to travel a lot. He had trade caravans who used to travel between India and Iran, particularly, and also go to Bukhara and Samarkand. So he was very well known in the area. My own father, Mukhtar Ahmad Ayaz, he was born in the place called Miani. That is the name of the place I'm talking about. And he had his early education in the local school. Now, about a couple of miles from Miani, there was a village known as Gugiat. Now, in that village, there was an Ahmadiyya mosque, and there was also a very devoted, dedicated Ahmadi family of Babu Fakhruddin Saab. And his sons were very prominent in the Jamaat, Professor Ibrahim Nasser and Maulvi Yaqub Saab, etc. And they were the schoolmates of my father. So my father, because of that friendship, used to visit their homes, their families, and go with them to the mosque as well and offer his namaz. And during those visits, he learned a lot of poems of Durre Samin, which those children used to recite. And he also started reciting those poems. And he recited those poems even when he came home. And he got very attached to that family. And in about 1918, when that family was going to Qadian for Jalsa Salana, they asked my father if he would accompany them. And my grandfather was a nice person. He didn't know much about religion. So he gave my father the permission to go with them to Qadian. And when he went to Qadian, during his stay, whatever it was, a week or 10 days, he was so impressed by the environment and listening to the sermons of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Sani, Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anho, that he, without asking his family or father or anyone, he took Bayat in Qadian. And when he came back, and he told his father what he had done, his father became very angry to the extent that they asked him to leave the house and go wherever he wanted to go to the masjid or wherever. So that was the end of it. But my father remained very calm and very strong in his faith, and he continued to visit the mosque. One day, when he was in the mosque, he saw a cupboard which had books of the promised Messiah. And one of the books he saw was Durre Samin Farsi, the Persian book of the poems of the promised Messiah. And he knew that his father was very fond of Persian because he was visiting regularly Persia and he really liked the Persian poetry and literature. So he took that book, Durre Samin Farsi, and without saying anything, he gave it to his father. And his father became so fond of those poems that in his sitting room, sort of big lounge in those days, people used to sit on the carpets with pillows, etc. And a lot of people used to come to his lounge every day, including the local muftis and clergy, etc. So he used to recite those poems in a beautiful voice. And he himself got so inspired and so interested and so impressed that he too decided to become an Ahmadi. So Ahmadiyat came into our family through first my father, who took Bayat in about 1918, and then my grandfather also became an Ahmadi, and the rest of the family also became an Ahmadi. My father had three brothers and his mother, etc. So this is the story of Ahmadiyyat in the family. So when I was born, this was the year when Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Sani, Ayyadullah Ta'ala, Raziyallah Ta'ala Anho, he announced Tehreek-e-Jadid, the scheme of Tehreek-e-Jadid. This was 1934. Very interesting. And then when this scheme was announced, Huzur had invited volunteers, devotees to come and join the scheme. And the purpose of the scheme was to spread the message of Ahmadiyyat, the message of the promised Messiah, to every part of India and then every corner of the world. So during that time, it was a very, very challenging time for the Jamaat because, as we all know from the history, the RR were very active. They were holding rallies in Qadian and they were holding abusive meetings every night and here and there. So the emotion and the sentiment and the spirit of the Ahmadis were really very high. I remember as a very small child when I was in Qadian during that period, every Ahmadi did not know when it was night and when it was day. They were so much focused on prayers that everything that mattered to them was to offer everything, including their life, for Ahmadiyat. So Hazrat Muslim Maud Raziallah Ta'ala Anhu, under the guidance of Allah, introduced this scheme. And as I said, the purpose was to spread the message of Ahmadiyya. So my father, who was then employed in Rawalpindi in Arsenal, he left his job there. He resigned from Arsenal and came to Qadian to join this scheme. And in the initial days, Huzur had appointed him as Amir of short groups who went for tabligh to different parts. And my father was sent to an area called Makaria in district Hoshiarpur. And it is interesting to know that that was a time when the Jamaat had no financial resources at all. There was no money. And those volunteers who offered to work for Tariq-e-Jadid, they had to travel under very harsh circumstances. My father used to tell me that they had to walk from Qadian to Hoshiarpur. And sometimes, this was a long distance, and sometimes they had to do it during the heat of summer, when it was extremely hot. And then there was a lot of problem on the way, and there was cholera, and they were not allowed to drink water or eat any food on their way. So they were thirsty, they were hungry, but they were so devoted and dedicated that they took up this mission as best as they could. And then later on, Hazrat Muslim Maud developed this scheme into saying that those who are educated and they are able to earn their own living, they should come forward and go to foreign countries, go abroad and preach there, convey the message of Islam Ahmadiyyat, but don't expect any financial help from the Jamaat. They should work for their own living. So under that scheme, Hazrat Muslim Maud advised, directed my father to go to East Africa. And that is where the other chapter starts, my father going to East Africa. But what I really want to tell here, which is very important, is that when my father left for East Africa, my mother and me, and I had one sister at that time, the three of us were left behind in Qadian. And this was 1937. And we had to wait until he settled and we could go and join him maybe in a year's time or so. But what happened? In 1939, there was the Second World War. And because of the Second World War, all transport to any foreign country was stopped. At that time, there were no air services. We had to travel by steamships, and the steamships carrying passengers were stopped. There were no steamships going to anywhere. So we were stuck in Qadian. And that was a great blessing for my life, for me, because those years of war, they were tough years, challenging years because of the war. But I was exposed to a wonderful spiritual, moral atmosphere of Qadian. I had the opportunity of spending time in the company of the great companions of the promised Messiah, alayhi salam. I had the opportunity of participating and attending regularly the events and the sittings and the sermons and the addresses of Hazrat Muslim Maud, Raziallah Ta'ala Anhu. And that had a great impact on my character and on my future life. I was sort of immersed in that spiritual atmosphere, and I carried a lot of it with me wherever I went. The important thing, the other side of it is that I was not a very brilliant student in the school. I was a very ordinary school boy. And when I was there studying in Qadian, I never acquired, I don't think, any distinctive marks in my examinations or anything. But that side apart, the spiritual and moral side was so valuable that I really thank Allah for that opportunity which was given to me during that time. And then after the war, which ended in 1945, 1946, I was able to travel with my mother and my sister on a steamship sailing from Bombay to Mombasa. One other interesting thing is that when my father went to East Africa, he was boarding a ship and he sailed. And when the ship docked where he was to disembark, he saw outside and he saw a big board on which it was written Mombasa. So the name of the port was Mombasa. And my father told me that when he was in eighth grade studying in a primary school, he saw a dream. He saw a dream that he was sailing on a ship and the ship docked in some place. And when he looked out, he saw a board on which it was written Mombasa. So his dream of Mombasa came true in this miraculous way when he was sent to East Africa by Hazrat Muslim Maud Raziyallahu Anhu. So that is where the family introduction very briefly ends. And then there are other chapters of my life, which inshallah we shall talk about in due course.
Jazakallah, Dr. And it's really inspiring to hear the stories about the early pioneers of Ahmadiyya who went abroad. Mashallah, I think your father was in that category. It's very inspiring. Particularly, we are going through a Tabligh Ashra at the moment, and it's really interesting to see how Tabligh was carried out in the early days. Moving on, then, you mentioned that you moved to Tanzania, and I think you received your secondary education there. Can you tell us briefly what life was like there in Tanzania for you?
It's very interesting. When I went to Tanzania, at that time it was not Tanzania, it was Tanganyika.
I think it was.
It was Tanganyika. And my father was living in the second largest town of Tanganyika. The name of that town was Tanga. So it was a coastal town, quite a big town. And my father was a teacher in a secondary school in that town. He had got a job there. And we had a very small Jamaat, I think about 3 or 4 families altogether in the whole town. But let me tell you, the Jamaat had such an influence and impact upon the public that they were thinking probably there are hundreds of them. Because when we used to have these special annual events like Jalsa Peshwayane Mazahib or Jalsa Siratul Nabi, we used to hire a hall, and the hall was huge. I mean, from the point of view of those times, there used to be 300-400 people, and just for 2 or 3 people to organize an event and have 300 or 400 people attending the event was a great success, and everybody talked about the Ahmadiyya movement. When I went to Tanga, my father took me to the school and introduced me to the head of the school. And then I was admitted to class 7 or 8. Now, the medium of instruction in that school was English. And my English was almost zero. I could hardly understand any English or speak any English. So this was a big problem. So they moved me back into another area where the medium of instruction was ethnic languages. And the teacher who was teaching was from India, and he was teaching in Urdu. So I joined in that class. I could not manage to sit in the class where I should have been because of no English. So until the age of about 15, I could hardly speak any English. But this also was Allah's blessing that later on, um, this is also interesting, I think, to know how Allah helps you in your life. I was once suffering from cerebral malaria, and my father took me to a local private hospital, which was run by a German doctor. And there used to be a nurse who was from South Africa. So when I was admitted in that hospital, this nurse used to bring Reader's Digest magazines for me because I was there all the time. And he said, "Oh, this is very interesting. You read it." And that magazine, you know, motivated me into learning English. And there used to be some exercise in the magazine which I would take up and learn on that. And this is how I started improving in the English language. And then, by Allah's grace, gradually, slowly, I became quite competent by Allah's grace. But the important thing is that I was, for some reason, because of my training in Qadian, I was quite confident in taking part in social events and in other events as well at school. I was a very active Boy Scout. I joined the scouting movement, and I was also the president of Bazme Urdu. So I had the opportunity of taking part in declamations and debates and such activities, which actually were training for my future, so that when I grow up, I could use those skills for spreading the message of Ahmadiyyat Islam and also serving humanity. So this is how my education started in Tanga. But then in 1946, soon after the Second World War, Hazrat Muslim Maud Razilatullah Anho sent a large group, 7 or 8 missionaries to East Africa. And one of those missionaries was posted to Tanga, where I used to live. And after school, most of my time was spent with the missionary. And that was a great training for me. He would not sit in the house, he would go out preaching and stand in the garden, stand in the park. People would come to him and there would be question and answer. And I would be standing by him and I would be supporting him. And sometimes, because I had learned the language, Kiswahili, I could also join in. And later on, he used to visit the prisons and he took me with him, just the two of us, the missionary and me. And he used to preach in the prison. And then later on, he stopped going himself and he sent me alone. He said, "Okay, now you are capable, you go alone and do the preaching in the prison." So I would go in the prisons and preach and come back just on my own. And then what was I? I was, I think, probably about 16, 17 years old. So this is how my childhood was spent. And as I said, I was a very active Boy Scout. I used to go on hikes. I remember a 25 miles hike where I was taken blindfolded and dropped somewhere in the bush at night. And I had to come back walking 25 miles, and which I did. And that was a very good training for me for the future. And then I was selected as a Boy Scout to go for the East African Jamboree, which was held in Uganda. And I was representing my town, my school. So there were such opportunities which helped building up my character. And I really advanced in Boy Scouting. I became the Tanzania's national training commissioner for Boy Scouts, and I held some important offices as well in other organizations like Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, and then such several other organizations. So my social life was quite active, quite busy, but at the same time, I was very, very much involved in the work of the Jamaat. I saw that there was no library in Tanga. So I asked my father to get two cupboards made, and he got two cupboards. And then I started corresponding with Qadian and other places to get books. And we got the books. And then we named that library Mubarak Library after the name of our missionary in charge, Sheikh Mubarak Ahmad Saab. So the life was full of activities, but always I would give preference to the activities of the Jamaat. And I learned that obeying the missionaries was a great blessing. And in my thought and in my mind, it was through the obedience of parents and the obedience of the missionary that one could obey the Khalifa. And through obeying the Khalifa, one could obey the promised Messiah. And through obeying the promised Messiah, one could obey the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then obey Allah. So this is something very important to bear in mind, that obedience is the root of achievements and great success in life. And I would urge my youngsters right from this age not to be influenced by the society outside, by other material matters, but focus and think of obedience to parents as a blessing. Maybe parents are not that educated as our youth may be, but the blessings in their obedience is great. Similarly, the obedience of the Khalifa, etc., they bring lots of blessings in the life of a person. So this is how my educational career in Tanga continued to a point where I was able to complete my secondary education. And at that time, there used to be these exams, because it was a colonial country, so we had senior Cambridge examination and higher senior Cambridge examination. So there was nothing beyond that in that country. There were no colleges and there was no university. So when one passed the senior Cambridge exams, there was no scope for further education. So at that point, my father was very keen that instead of going here or there, I should go to Rabwa and I should offer myself at the feet of Hazrat Muslim Maud Razallah Ta'ala Anho and ask his advice what I should do. If he asked me to go to Jamia, I should go to Jamia. If he asked me to do something else, I should do something else. So accordingly, in 1953, 54, I came back to Pakistan. And when I was in Pakistan, I presented myself to Hazrat Muslim Maud Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu. And he advised me, he said, it's better for you, you go and join TI College. TI College then was in Lahore. So I went to Lahore and I joined the college. And there again, because of my competence in English and other social qualities, whatever they were, I was so much drawn into the social activities of the college. And within a very short period, 6 months or 8 months, when there were student union elections, I was elected as the general secretary of the union. So I worked as that. And I had very great affection from the principal, Hazrat Mirza Nasir Ahmad, who was then our beloved third Khalifa. He was very nice and very kind to me, and he entrusted me with several responsibilities of dealing with foreign guests and some such other responsibilities which I carried on. But before I went to Pakistan, I had applied for a scholarship to go for teacher education. And while I was in Lahore, I received the confirmation that my scholarship had been approved and I could join the teacher training college in Nairobi, Kenya. So I went to Huzur and I told Huzur what had happened. And he graciously said, yes, it might be better for you to go and accept this scholarship and continue with your education as a teacher. So I returned back to Tanga and I briefly taught in a primary school at that time. This was back in 1956, I think, about that time. And just you will probably laugh at hearing this. At that time, I was teaching, and my monthly salary, in terms of money today, was 20 pennies every month. 20 pennies every month. This is what I used to get. But anyway, I was, as I said, given the scholarship to go to Nairobi and join the teacher training college. This was a 2-year course. Now, during that period, again, I had the opportunity of associating and working with the Jamaat in Nairobi. At that time, Nairobi used to be the headquarters of the Jamaat for the whole of East Africa, because East Africa then was one government, it was one administration. So I was under the care of Sheikh Mubarak Ahmad Saab, and we used to do a lot of work. Especially, I had the opportunity to assist and work for the translation of the Holy Quran into the Kiswahili language. So those activities carried on. And one very important achievement during that period was that one day I saw on the notice board that there was a special course to train youngsters to climb mountains. So I applied for that and I was accepted. And the challenge of that course was that after a short training, the challenge was to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, which is 19,330 feet. And it is the highest mountain in Africa. So I was accepted for that. And I went to the course. And we were given 10 days training in mountain climbing, which was very interesting, very tough training, but it proved very good for the training of one's character. And eventually there was the challenge to climb the mountain, and this was a 5-day challenge. So Alhamdulillah, by Allah's grace, I climbed the mountain in 3 days, and it took 2 days to come down. So that was a very interesting event of that part of my stay in Kenya, in Nairobi. So that was the first phase of my education. And then I came back to Tanga, and I was a qualified teacher, so I got a better job with the government. But then interestingly, I did not have the opportunity to teach for very long. After a very short period, I was selected and appointed as Assistant Inspector of Schools for English medium schools. And I worked in that position for a couple of years. And I had the opportunity to travel all over the country, visiting English medium schools, etc. But then I would always keep some leaflets, some literature with me wherever I would go. And at that time, we did not have many Jamaats, but we had some Jamaats. And wherever we had Jamaats, I would attach with them and do whatever we could do together locally. Sometimes we would organize some meetings. Sometimes we would arrange some rallies and things like that. So it was a very interesting and very active period of my life. So Alhamdulillah, when I completed my tenure a couple of years again as assistant inspector of schools, I was selected to be a district education officer, and so on and so forth. Now, one very interesting thing happened, and that was in about 1965, there was a great tension between Africa and UK. And the cause of the tension was the apartheid government in South Africa. And the UK government was supplying arms to the apartheid government, and they were using those arms against the local Africans. They were denying them their right of freedom, denying them their independence. So, because of that tension, most of the African countries decided to break diplomatic relations with UK. And as a result of that, UK withdrew all the technical assistance personnel which they had donated to Tanzania. As such, there were big gaps of technical workers in the government of Tanzania. So they, at that time, uh, were looking for people here and there. But they asked me to take up a position for which I was not really qualified. And I told them that I'm not qualified, but if you insist, I can hold on to this position for a period of time. Now, during that time, it was Tanzania's time for independence. In 1961, most of Africa became independent. And Tanzania also became independent because the East African government came to an end, and Kenya and Uganda and Tanzania were split into separate states, sovereign states. So Tanzania was then on its own as a separate sovereign state. And because of this situation, they were really short of manpower in the country. But at the same time, after independence, the Africans, the local Africans, they were very excited. They had seen how the Asians and the Europeans lived in the country in such comfort with such amenities. They had big houses, they had cars, they had this, they had that. So Africans wanted to take up all that overnight. They didn't want to work for it. They said, okay, throw these Indians, Asians, Europeans outside the country and give us all that they leave behind. Now, this was a critical challenge for the government of the country. They were trying to control the situation, and they were trying to see that everything is done peacefully. So what they did was they introduced a scheme for expatriates, that is Asians and Europeans, to leave the country with their expected benefits and amenities, their pensions, or whatever it is. And nearly all the expatriates, including Ahmadi expatriates, they left the country. Some came to UK and some went to Canada and other countries. So I was also in a dilemma. I was with my family, and we were all living under an atmosphere of fear and insecurity. So at that time, I wrote to Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Salis, Rahimullah, that this is the situation, and Huzur knew the situation, obviously, and I want to live like others, but I don't want to decide whether I should go to Canada or I should go to UK, and I would like Huzur to give me the direction and give me the guidance. So Huzur wrote back to me, and he said, no, you are not going to Kenya, you are not going to Canada, you are not going to UK, you will remain in Tanzania. And he said that you renounce your British citizenship, which I had at that time, and you take out the Tanzanian citizenship. Now, this was a very, very, very challenging decision which I received. And a very critical one as well for my future. So when I spoke to our local leaders of the Jamaat, the missionary, the president, etc., they all said, well, you probably did not write in detail to Huzur, so it will be better you write again and give Huzur the detail of the real situation which we all are facing in this country, so that Huzur can give you his decision. But when I came home, I spoke to my wife as well, and we decided that we will not do anything else but follow the directive, the guidance, the instruction that Huzur has sent us, and we will not go from this country. We will stay in Tanzania, and we will renounce the British citizenship. So, accordingly, in those circumstances, I went to the British High Commission to renounce my citizenship. And they thought I had gone crazy because nobody wanted to lose the British citizenship at that time in those circumstances. But Alhamdulillah, my British citizenship was renounced. And when the government came to know about this, they were very happy because my service record was excellent. And they wanted to use me for greater services in the country. So they were very happy. And they helped me to get my Tanzanian citizenship in just a few months. So I became a citizen. And when I was, as I said earlier on, I was given a very responsible job for which I was not qualified. I told the government, I said, well, how can I really do justice to this job when I don't have the qualifications? So they said, don't worry, now you are a citizen, we will take care of that. So this is where that ended. And then how it developed is also a great source of inspiration. In 1972,
Dr. Saab, can I, sorry to interrupt you. We are short of time as well. Very interesting time in your life that you're explaining, and maybe we can come back to that at some other time. I wanted to move to an equally important part of your life, which I'm sure viewers would be interested in. I mean, you've had a long and distinguished career serving humanity, working with United Nations, and we can see that how you were inspired by that, by your events that took place in your life, and you were then sent to Tuvalu, the South Pacific island, as a Commonwealth field expert. I would really like to get to that point because I think that would be very interesting for the viewers regarding how that happened, and if you could explain that as well, how that came about and the opportunities that you were given there for Tabligh and all that. It's very interesting show to the viewers.
Yeah, so just to bridge up what you are asking me for and where I stopped, the important point is that I became a Tanzanian citizen. Now, these big organizations, international organizations like United Nations, Commonwealth, etc., they have a quota for each member countries for employment. So Tanzania had its own quota. Tanzania could offer 2 or 3 people every year for employment in the Commonwealth or the United Nations. But that was restricted to only Tanzanians, not others. Now, an opportunity arose, that there were some vacancies in the Commonwealth Secretariat. And as a Tanzanian, I could apply for that. I would not have been able to apply for that job as a British citizen. Nobody would even bother about me if I were a British citizen, see. But because I had obeyed the command of the Khalifa, I had become a Tanzanian. So as a Tanzanian, I was qualified to apply for that job in the Commonwealth. And even before I got that job, I got another job with FAO, that is the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. They were setting up a center for integrated rural development for Africa. And I was offered a job in that center, and I took up that job. So all this happened. I want to emphasize this because of the obedience to the Khalifa without any question, not thinking what will happen in the world, what will happen in the future, but my beloved Khalifa has asked me to do this, and look at the fruits, at the benefits that I got. So I got this job with FAO, and then this job, my contract ended in 1984, December. So then I was offered a job in Rome with the Food and Agriculture Organization headquarters in Rome. So I accepted that job, and I came to England so that I could settle my family in London and then go to Rome to work for that. Now, because of those opportunities, I had the opportunity to address the UNESCO on behalf of various countries, which I did, and as you can see in the illustration. But then what happened was that I had accepted this job in Rome. Then the Commonwealth also offered me a job in Tuvalu. So I went to Huzur. He was already in London in December 1984. And I told Huzur that I had accepted the job and now I have this offer. And I was sure Huzur would say, oh, why go to Tuvalu? Go to Rome, which is a better place. But I was surprised. I was surprised that Huzur very attentively heard that I had an offer to go to Tuvalu. And he said, Tuvalu? I said, yes, Tuvalu. And he said, okay. A couple of days ago, I had received a letter from someone in the Pacific region that Tuvalu is an island state which is 100% Christian. And it said that, Huzur, if you really want to spread the tabligh in the small island states of the Pacific, then send someone to Tuvalu. So Huzur said, this is from Allah. So you don't have to go to Rome, you have to go to Tuvalu. So that is how the decision for me to go to Tuvalu arose. This was again in obedience to the command of the Khalifa. I already had a job in hand, which was very good, staying in Europe, staying very close to my family. But then I accepted this job, which was thousands and thousands of miles away in an isolated, remote island state. But because my beloved Khalifa had said that, I honored his wish and I went to Tuvalu. And this proved a turning point again in my life. It was the beginning of a great chapter. Tuvalu, as I've said, was a small island state. And when I went there, Huzur said, go there as a missionary. Always bear in mind that you are going there to preach. So I kept on praying to Allah that Allah enable me to fulfill Huzur's wish and desire and enable me to do some preaching in that country. So when I arrived there, as is the custom, I was expected to go and report to the chief secretary of the government. I went, we talked for a little while. And when I was about to leave, he said to me, we know you are a Muslim, but remember that this is a Christian state. And we would not like you to interfere into any religious matter. You just do the job you are here for and no preaching and nothing of the sort. Now I'm so delighted to look at the picture of the mosque in Tuvalu. So with Allah's blessings, when this chief secretary said to me, I can't preach, I was extremely worried. I said, look, I'm here for this purpose, and this man is telling me not to do it. So the only way for me was to focus on prayers, which I started doing, and see how Allah helps. I was staying in a hotel. At that time, I had no house, and I started praying. And one evening, when I was coming back after a short walk, someone came briskly walking behind me. And he said, "Oh, I have heard on the radio you are an education expert, and I was a pastor in the Seventh day Adventist church. I have now resigned. I want to improve my education. Would you help me, please?" I said, "Yes, I'm here to help you people. So, no problem. Tell me what I can do for you." So he started talking. And then he said, "Oh, look, my house is just by the side of the road. Please come and sit for a little while." So I went into his house, and after just a few minutes, there were no signs of any rain or etc. It started raining. And it started raining, and it continued to rain for half an hour. And during that half an hour, he was asking me questions. He said, "I was a pastor. This is what we were told about Islam. So tell me, what is the truth?" Now, I was not preaching him. He was asking me questions, and I had to answer. So I was obeying the law of the country, but at the same time, Allah provided me with this opportunity. And then he became a close friend, and he would come and visit me. So at the end of the day, he, by Allah's grace, after about 3 months of my stay in that country, he became Ahmadi, and Huzur gave him the name Ataul Awal. So this process continued gradually, and more people started joining Islam, Ahmadiyyat, by Allah's grace. And then Allah also blessed us with opportunities to build a mosque, as you have just seen, and also build a mission house, and also translate a lot of basic literature in their local language. And then eventually, I thought we should also translate the Holy Quran into their language, which we started doing. So there was a language board. I went to the chairman of the language board, and I told him, "Please, could you translate this Holy Quran for us, and I will pay you for it." And he accepted it. And he had a deputy who also started helping him. Now, this deputy became very interested in the Holy Quran, and he would come to me with certain verses and ask me, "What does this verse actually mean? Please tell us this, that, that." And I would tell him. And slowly, by Allah's grace, I don't know what Allah put in his heart, he decided to become an Ahmadi. So the deputy of the language board became an Ahmadi. And then Huzur, Khalifa Rabi Rahmullahi, invited him to Jalsa Salana here. The head of the police department also became Ahmadi. He was also invited to Jalsa Salana here in London. And then they completed the translation of the Holy Quran, and it was published and printed here in Rakim Press in London as well. So this is how things develop. But let me tell you, there was very, very strong opposition from the church in Tuvalu. The church actually complained to the prime minister, and the opposition raised a question that this man who is here is interfering into our religion and misguiding our people. So the government should cancel his contract and expel him from the islands. So the prime minister was a very wise person. So he replied this question in the parliament. He said, "Look, he's not going house to house to preach. People go to him to ask questions. Now, what do you expect him? Your church should stop people from asking them to go to him to ask questions, rather than we expelling him when he's doing some such excellent work for our country." So this is how the life continued in Tuvalu. And then you see, initially I went on the contract of the Commonwealth Secretariat as a field expert. But by Allah's mercy, by Allah's grace, as the Jamaat programs were extending, the Jamaat was established, it had to be registered, the mosque had to be built. All these things required time. So Allah continued my contract to be extended by the government. I didn't ask for it. They would say, "Okay, please stay on for another 2 years, please stay on for another 2 years." And then all the funding provided by the Commonwealth was exhausted. They requested the United Nations to take me over as a consultant, which they did. And by the grace of Allah, the work I was doing was so popular that the United Nations said, "You will not do it only for Tuvalu, you will do it for the whole region." as a consultant of the United Nations Development Program. So I was a consultant with them, and that provided me with the opportunity of traveling to all the small island states in the Pacific region. And Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabe mentioned this in one of his speeches as well. By the grace of Allah, that way I was able to convey the message of Ahmadiyyat to 14 small island states in the Pacific. And by Allah's grace, you can see here the governor of Tuvalu visiting, and he's a person who met Hazrat Amir al-Mumineen with his family, and Huzur was very pleased and he was very happy, and he is here with me in this picture here. But what I am saying is that through that obedience in the first instance of accepting to come to Tuvalu, Allah blessed me with traveling around. And forgive me, I'm a very humble person, but I will tell you that when I used to go onto these missions of the United Nations, there was no pride in me or, oh, I am this or I am that. I would very humbly spend my time on the plane praying that God Almighty, I'm going to this particular island, enable me, provide me the opportunities to convey the message of the promised Messiah, alayhi salam. I would not bother so much about the project which was assigned to me, but I would just pray that Allah enable me to do this. And that way, I can tell you that the project that was given to me ended up in such a way that it was more effective, more productive, more impressive, and the UN people were so much pleased with it, then I could have done myself with my own knowledge and effort. So this is again, look at the blessings of Allah in our life when we think of Allah. And always remember the saying of the promised Messiah, alayhi salam, that is, always give preference to your faith over the world affairs. So whatever you are doing, wherever you are working, always bear in mind every time, there should be no time when we are not thinking of being helpful and useful to our beloved Jamaat and to our beloved promised Messiah, and the responsibility which has been put on our shoulders to convey the message of the promised Messiah and Ahmadiyyat to everywhere where we are. So this is how it ended. But I will tell you something very interesting, which is part of this story. And that is when I completed all my contracts in Tuvalu and I was about to come back to London, one afternoon when I was packing in my house, getting ready, in the afternoon, there was a knock at the door. And when I went to the door, I saw it was the Prime Minister wanting to come and talk to me. So he came in. He was fairly informal with me, and he started talking about my trip and this and that. And then at the end of the conversation, he said, look, for a long time, we have been looking for a representative of our country in the United Kingdom, and we had not found anyone. But we would like you to be our representative in the United Kingdom. Now look, a Christian country, a Christian state, a Christian Orthodox Prime Minister asking an humble servant of Jamaat Ahmadiyya to represent them in UK. What a wonderful thing. What a wonderful thing. So this is what happened. Then I became the official representative of Tuvalu in this country in 1995, such a long time ago. And still, I am their representative. And now, as you must have heard, they recently appointed me as ambassador to the Commonwealth and ambassador to the UN Human Rights Council, etc. So these things have been going on. These things have been going on, not because of my skills or education or capability or this or that. One very important thing which we missed out, of course, as I am told, we are short of time, but they're very inspiring. For example, I had as I told you, I just had teacher education training in Kenya. I had just teacher education training in Kenya and no university courses, no university degrees. So it happened that the government was able to secure a Commonwealth fellowship for me. And I was given admission to the Newcastle University here in UK. And I got a degree, which was a bachelor and an honors degree in social studies and English and also education. The interesting thing is that in that university, I had taken English language as a special major subject. And when the exams took place, I, as an overseas student, came first, top of the list in English language. Now, just remember, at the age of 15, I could not even utter a good sentence in the English language. And here I am, because of the blessings of Khilafat and Ahmadiyyat, I am standing first where nearly 90% of the students were British, and just only a few students who were overseas, including myself. And I came out first in English language. So, Alhamdulillah, that way, things have been progressing. And then I did so well that I was offered an extended scholarship in the University of London, where I came, and I got 2 diplomas. And then I was strongly recommended that I should also go for a master's degree, but I could not because I had no scholarship, I had no money. So the director here in London of the Institute of Education, he called me to his office and he said, "Look, you have done so well. We don't want to lose you. We have a job for you in Nigeria." I said, "No, sir, I'm not going to accept any job. I'm going back to Tanzania because the government sent me here for a purpose, and I want to go back and serve that country." So he was surprised, but he was also very pleased that I had that sort of spirit. So when I was about to go back to Tanzania, I went to our High Commission in London, requesting them to prepare for my return journey, book my tickets, book the tickets of my family who was with me, etc., etc. And the education attaché, he said, "Hang on, just sit here." And then he came back. He said, "Look, we've got a job for you here in the Commonwealth Institute." There used to be a Commonwealth Institute on Kensington High Street. And he said, "They want a fellow for Africa, and we want to second you to the Institute for 1 year." Now I'm going to ask him for my return tickets, and he's asking me to take up this job. Now, this was again a blessing of Allah. Because of getting that job, I was able to stay here for another year in which I could complete my master's degree. Wonderful, wonderful. And then what happened? Look, this is again Allah's blessing. What happened? When I joined the Commonwealth Institute, the university people also came to know about it, that I was staying here. So the director once sent me a message. He said, "Come and see me." So I went to see him. He said, "Why don't you register for masters?" I said, "How can I do? I have a full-time job now with the Commonwealth Institute." He said, "Look, we've got some evening classes starting about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon and ending at about 9:30, 10 at night. Join those classes." So I was amazed. I said, "How? This is all Allah's planning." So I came back, and the institute people were kind. They allowed me to leave the institute at around 4 o'clock. And then I would take a bus, go to the university, attend my classes, finish at 10, go back home, leave home early in the morning to come to the institute, work for them, and so on and so forth. And that is how I completed my master's in applied linguistics. So this is how Allah helps. When you become an honest, sublime, very sincere servant of Allah, and you give up yourself for the sake of Allah, for the service of Allah, then Allah takes you over. and he does everything that you require. And Allah has very clearly said in the Holy Quran that all the honors are there, and I can give you the honors if I wish to, and if I don't wish to, you will never get any honors. So the real honors come from Allah. So he has to be our best friend, and we have to be his best servant in our lives. So this was an ongoing chapter of the Tuvalu events. But then, you see, I was able to achieve such commendations from those governments with whom I worked that first the Queen gave me the honor of OBE. This was after my completion of contracts in the Pacific, which is the Officer of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. And then later on, through my services for the Commonwealth, through my services for the realms of Her Majesty, I was recognized and given the highest civil honor, which is the Knight Commander, not only the Knight, but the Knight Commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. Look at me, an humble servant of Islam, Ahmadiyyat, with no skill, no such education or any special merit. And Allah is blessing me, taking me to the highest point in civil awards. And not only that, I will tell you the other side of the story. When I arrived here in London after my tenure in Tuvalu, I had the shock of my life. I arrived at the airport and I was just walking out with my trolley, thinking that my family would be there at the airport to meet me. Now, when I came out in the arrivals hall, I was shocked to see the Wakilut Tabshir, the Imam Sadr Ansarullah, and I even don't remember, there were a couple of other people standing there with garlands to welcome me. You see, it was so emotional, so emotional. I can't really describe it in words. It's just the tears trying to flood out of my ears. But this is what happened. This is what happened. And this welcome was because, in the eyes of the Khalifa, I had done something which probably deserved such a reception or such greetings. And then, not only that, just a day or two after my arrival, Wakilut Tafshir arranged a dinner in my honor, which was attended by the Amir and all the dignitaries of the Jamaat and all my family. And Huzur himself in person attended that event. In person, he attended that event. And then he addressed that event, talking about my work in the Pacific. I think that was the greatest honor, unforgettable honor of my life. I can never forget it. And this is what happened. This is what happened. And then, I started receiving so many awards from so many organizations. When some people come to visit me here, they say this is very much like a museum because all the walls are packed with these testimonials and photos and this and that. Some of these photos you've seen today in today's program. So some of these awards were given not only in this country, but they were given in other countries. For example, I received one award from the President of India. I received one award in America when I was attending the World Forum, etc. So they have been coming from all over the world and so many different organizations. And then Allah also gave me the great honor of representing Huzur in various Jamaat events. I've been a speaker at Jalsa Salana in so many different countries, not only UK. I have been a keynote speaker I have been a keynote speaker in various countries for the peace symposiums. I was there for the first peace symposium in Africa. I was there for the peace symposiums in Indonesia and Malaysia. I mean, you know, there are scores of countries. I cannot count them here. I have been to as a representative of Huzur to address those countries on peace topics. So, Alhamdulillah, that side also was very blessed. And then, you know, in spite of being a Sadr of Ansarullah, Huzur elevated me to the status of Amir of United Kingdom. Now look, the Queen is elevating me to the status of Knight Commander. And my spiritual master is elevating me to the status of Amir. And there is nothing beyond the status of Amir under the Nizam of the Jamaat. And there is nothing beyond a Knight Commander under the order of the British Empire. So look, and look at me, you know, a very, very insignificant, a very humble, unskilled, I would say uneducated person, you know. And then Allah is continuing to bless me. You have a question, I suppose, on my work with the refugees and the UN High Commission for Refugees. And you know, I had this opportunity of working very closely with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. As you know, for some reason, these lost people, they have no concept of Allah, they have no concept of the Holy Prophet, they have no concept of the teachings of Islam, and they are harassing and they're torturing and they're persecuting Ahmadis in Pakistan, and this has been going on for more than 40 years now. So because of that, a large number of our people have been fleeing from Pakistan to look for a place where they can reside in peace and live a normal life and educate their children and bring them up, you know, as they wish to. And that is why we have a very serious, challenging problem of refugees and asylum seekers. At the moment, in different countries, you know, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Sri Lanka, Philippines, Korea, Hong Kong, you know, and some African countries as well, we have almost 8,000 refugees. They are stranded there. And they have been stranded there not for 1 or 2 years. Some have been sitting there for 8 or 9 years and no settlement for them. No settlement for them. Now, partly this is because the world itself is facing the worst migrant crisis. You know what is happening in UK here. Hundreds of people just sailing across the channel and entering illegally into this country. And so forth. Look at what is going on in Greece, look at what is going on in Italy, and look at the huge camps of displaced people and refugees in Africa. Go to Uganda, go to Turkey, hundreds and thousands of people lying on the floor, most of them dying, and nobody knows what happens to them. So this is a very, very painful time. We can talk about these things, but the actual fact is that this is very painful. Sometimes I receive phone calls almost every day from such people who are in pain and trouble. And when I hear such stories, it just hurts me so much that I lose my sleep. So we are trying to do whatever we can. There are problems, there are huge problems, but we know that by Allah's grace and with the prayers of our beloved Imam, we shall be able to overcome these challenges. And a time will come when all our people, all Ahmadis, all over the world, will have a life which will be comfortable, which will be blessed, and they will be able to spend all their energies in conveying the message of the promised Messiah to the corners of the world. Yes, sir.
Jazakallah. And sadly, we have run out of time. But there's so much more that we can talk about and gain from your so much experience that you have. Having worked with 4 of the caliphs or 3 of the caliphs and had received guidance from Hazrat Muslim Maud as well. So, Jazakallah for a most interesting and inspiring evening that we have had. Inshallah, we will have another chance again. Jazakallah. I will now request respected Regent Mir Sahab for the closing remarks and silent prayer.
Jazakumullah, respected Dr. Sir Ifthkar Ayaz Sahab. First of all, please accept our apology. Such an interesting and wonderful session we had with you. Apology, we ran out of the time, and inshallah ta'ala, if time permit, inshallah ta'ala, in the future, we will have another session with you, inshallah ta'ala. Respected Dr. Sahab, you gave us this opportunity and to give us this time this evening. We are very grateful to you. Today we have learned some of your life achievement and success, that how wonderful and successful you had a life, not only as a Jamaat member, but in your professional life. So may Allah bless you. We all pray for Allah the Almighty to give you a long and healthy life and give you opportunity to serve the Jamaat Ahmadiyya as long as possible. Dr. Sahab, you are an excellent role model for us. We are proud of you. It's wonderful to see you on behalf of the whole region, the entire East region. I thank you for your time and sparing the time and coming and talking to us. Jazakumullah wa jaza. I'm looking at the YouTube messages, the number of messages we are receiving from the members. They are sitting in their homes and listening and enjoying your speech. Shahid Khan Sahab from Gillingham, he is the son of Qari Yasin Khan Sahab, and he said he remembered your home in Tanganyika, and he had the opportunity in early 60 to be a guest of your parents. So Jazakallah Shahid Sahab for sharing. So Jazakumullah once again, Dr. Sahab, for your time. So may Allah bless you. With these few words, can I request you, Dr. Sahab, to lead us in a silent prayer, please?
Let's pray, please. Ameen. Jazakumullah ta'ala for the opportunity. And Allah bless you all.
Allah bless you. Thank you very much.
Jazakumullah.
Everyone. Jazakallah for your time. Thank you.
Allah bless you. To all your members of the region, Allah bless them all, keep them happy and in good health.
Inshallah. Inshallah. Jazakumullah.
Assalam.
Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.